Hello everyone, welcome to our last episode of 6 in our series focused on sustainability in practice. Well done if you've managed to attend them all, give yourselves a pat on the back. And for anyone that wants to catch up, all of the recordings will be sent out and are accessible on our YouTube channel. The good news is there are more webinars to come, so we're starting season 2 in about a month or so stay tuned for that. But back to today, where we'll be exploring double materiality and how it lays the foundation for best practice ESG reporting. So before we jump in, just wanted to give you a quick reminder on some housekeeping. So please unmute your device after joining so you can hear all the webinar speakers. Yes, that has been a bit of a problem in the past. Drop any questions into the comment section as we go. We'll always remembering to be respectful of other attendees in the process, and we'll share these slides with you after the webinar so you have all the follow-up links to hand. Real quick one from me, apologies for any background noise you might hear. There is a strike going on right outside our building, so there's kind of loads of air horns, car horns getting blasted. Billy will let me know if it gets too noisy. I might actually do a bit of a mid-webinar move, which is always fun. But for any newbies on the call who haven't seen the other sessions or maybe haven't worked with us in the past, welcome. We're Positive Planet, so we are a small consultancy with big heart. We started with emissions measurement and have grown into a team of 25 who not only specialise in emissions footprinting and reductions, but also LCA, training and ESG. And our clients span pretty much all industries, so from construction to retail to maritime to manufacturing, just to name a few. And the organisational size of these clients is varied as well. So we've got SMEs, mid-caps, and then stretching into that more enterprise-sized business. And now just a little bit more on your speaker. So that's me. I'm Emma. I'm Principal ESG Consultant for Positive Planet. I've worked with a range of businesses from SMEs into those large corporates on strategy and reporting, both from that voluntary and mandatory perspective. I started working on double materiality when it was first introduced as part of the draft standards under the CSRD. And part of this really meant helping to develop the methodology for how companies should be performing double materiality assessments. And then since then, I've worked on DMAs for large tech companies for compliance purposes, down to SMEs who want to do it as part of that wider strategic piece. I am on my own today. PK, my colleague, wasn't able to join, so it's just me until the end. But I have Billy from our marketing and events coordinator in the background also. So let's just start. If you just drop into the chat, tell me who you are, where you're from, what you're hoping to get out of this session. Is it understanding more about double materiality for compliance purposes or more of a strategic growth tool? So just drop that into the chat and hopefully I can answer live. Otherwise, there will be time for a Q&A at the end. Just a note, sometimes the Q&A does go on past the allotted time, but I'm happy to stay on a few extra minutes as well to answer questions. Right, so if we zoom out for a sec and look at ESG end to end, there's 3 main elements. You've got materiality, and this is what prioritises topics which are most important to your organisation. And then you've got strategy, so framing those topics and having key actions and targets against them. And then finally into reporting, so communicating everything that you're doing into an impact or an ESG report, ideally aligned to a best practice framework. And a double materiality assessment is really seen as the best practice approach to materiality. So in a nutshell, it's becoming essential to look at your organisation through 2 lenses. So you've got your outwards impact lens, so we're at bottom left here. So as a company, this is your negative and positive impact on the planet and society. So for example, a hotel chain will have a really high energy and water consumption. But if that hotel has really progressive policies around only employing local people or investing in the community surrounding it, or perhaps they source everything for the restaurant within 50 miles, then they're creating that positive impact. The second lens is the inward-facing view. So we are going top right here, and these are the financial risks and opportunities caused by the planet and society onto your organisation. So again, let's think about that hotel, and maybe it's located in an area of high water stress. So climate change poses a direct risk to the future of its operations from drought. However, on the flip side, potentially this hotel could diversify its service into nature-related activities. There might be an opportunity to expand into experience such as jungle trekking or safari. So what double materiality really does is sets that direction of travel. So businesses who haven't completed an assessment tend to have a really broad brush approach. and this wastes resources into areas that are not really a priority, whereas with having a targeted approach, resources redirected into the areas that actually matter. And then without having a defined strategy, progress is limited as teams are quite often confused on what they need to do and how to progress. Whereas using your material topics and setting a bespoke strategy really helps you set those appropriate targets and actions to drive progress. And finally, reports written without materiality can feel a little bit random. So there's no real mention on why those reported topics or pillars are important to that specific business. So instead, you should be reporting on areas of progress where you can make the biggest impact. And so for SMEs, so why is all of this important? Well, in the first instance, it gives you a stronger strategy in risk management. So DMA identifies which environmental and social topics matter most, both in terms of the company's impact on society and environment and financial exposure. So it also highlights climate, regulatory or supply chain risks early as well, so helping SMEs anticipate and manage them before they have the chance to really affect cash flow or operations. Plus, it also guides where to invest those limited resources that SMEs have into the areas that will have the greatest effect. Secondly, you've got improved access to finance and markets. So banks and investors are increasingly looking for credible ESG information. So DMA provides that structured evidence that they're asking for. It also plays a role in public sector and corporate tenders. So many customers and public bodies are now expecting double materiality disclosures in procurement, giving SMEs that competitive edge. Thirdly, you've got enhanced stakeholder trust and reputation. So this demonstrates to customers, employees, and communities that the business understands and manages its environmental and social impacts. Plus, it positions the SME as responsible and forward-thinking as well, and potentially a future partner in supply chains and markets. Then you've got your regulatory readiness. So in Europe, particularly the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that's the CSRD, is embedding double materiality as the norm. So conducting a DMA now prepares SMEs for future mandatory disclosures, as well as aligning with other global frameworks. So you've got compatibility with recognised standards such as the GRI or the ESRS and those evolving investor expectations. Plus, it drives innovation and efficiency. So by analysing both the financial and impact dimensions, SMEs can uncover new products, services, or operational improvements, such as starting to move into low carbon offerings or waste reduction activities. There's also cost savings to be had as well. So those efficiency gains in terms of energy or resource savings. And these are the types of things that often come up as material issues. So double materiality assessment really helps SMEs go beyond compliance to create that really strategic financial and reputational value, provides a really clear roadmap on where to act, strengthens stakeholder confidence and positions the business to thrive in a market where sustainability performance is quickly becoming a decisive factor for growth and investment. So where did it come from? So ESG reporting standards and frameworks have predominantly required impact materiality or financial materiality, but they serve two different audiences. So the impact sways more into the customer side, and that's the kind of things that they're looking for from reports, whereas financial is anyone that has that financial interest in the business, like shareholders or future investors. But then the CSRD came along, and that required double materiality, so that double-sided approach. So the intent of the CSRD was for the majority of businesses in the EU, from those multinational enterprises all the way down to SMEs, to be reporting sustainability data in a way that was uniform and comparable. And with the intent that all stakeholders, so from customers to investors, could take the relevant information that they were looking for from just one company's reporting company's sustainability statement. And if all companies were using the double materiality approach, it was kind of debated whether some of these acronyms would even now start to exist under the CSRD. It hasn't quite turned out like that due to changes in this legislation, and I could probably talk for a full hour on changes in EU regulations, but let's not go down that route today. But basically taking that double materiality approach means that you're covered, so you can report to any or all of the frameworks and standards using the results from your assessment. So how do we get to material topics? So again, two ways of looking at this. There's the bottom-up approach, and this starts with a really wide collection of inputs from stakeholders and operational data, and then builds out how to make these materials. So you would start by collecting insights from employees, customers and suppliers, community groups and other stakeholders. Then we're beginning to review the operational data, so environmental impacts, HR data, and supply chain metrics, and then identify the topics that emerge as significant from that ground level. And this is really great because it captures a really broad range of perspectives and emerging issues. So you've got really strong stakeholder credibility and alignment with the impact materiality. And it often reveals risks or opportunities that management may have not considered or have overlooked. And this is really time consuming, and take it from somebody who's done this process before, it's really, really resource intensive, and it produces a really long list of topics which then need a really careful prioritization. However, top-down is now kind of gaining in prominence, really, and this is where the top-down approach really begins with the organisation's strategic objectives and financial drivers, and then filters these material topics based on management's judgment. So how it works is senior leadership identifies strategic priorities and key financial risks and opportunities. It reviews regulations, investor expectations, and market trends. And this is what determines the sustainability issues which are most likely to influence business value. So the strengths here, it really focuses quickly on issues relevant to the financial materiality side. It's much more efficient and easier to align with corporate strategy. However, there is a risk that does overlook some stakeholders and their concerns or emerging social and environmental impacts. And there's slightly less credibility if some stakeholders do feel excluded from the process. So how to get started with double materiality. So before we jump in, I just want to get really clear on what we actually mean by financial risk and opportunity and positive and negative impacts. So this financial materiality can come from actual or potential risks and opportunities. So risks include financial threats caused by the environment or society onto your organisation, and opportunities include financial benefits caused by the environment or society onto your organisation. Risks and opportunities in the value chain can and should be considered as well. So, for example, the risk here is extreme weather causing operational disruption, and that could be in your office locations, meaning workers can't come in and work for that day, or it could be within your supply chain as well, if there is issues with transportation, for example, getting goods over. But there is also the opportunity as well, and this could be expanding into low carbon products or services. Onto the impact side, so positive and negative impact, again, can be actual or potential impacts. And just to really hone in on positive impacts for a sec, they should not be confused with business as usual activity. So positive impact should really be going beyond compliance or expectation and be actually designed to create social or environmental value. The example here would be a negative impact would be a failure to meet health and safety compliance, and this might result in a worker being injured. However, on the flip side, if a company is really actively investing in mental health support initiatives, this is creating a positive impact for its employees. And for any SMEs on the call, please don't think that you have to do all this thinking on your own. I know it's a lot of work, and I know a lot of people who have sustainability tag kind of into their job, it maybe isn't necessarily their background. So absolutely get digital to help. We have a platform which takes away all of that desk research burden out of the process and just is really 4 simple steps. So input your company information, tell us a little bit about who you are, what industry you're in, who your customers are, who you're supplying. And then the platform will automatically scan that sector to find those potentially relevant topics. And then we would then ask you to complete an ESG assessment to provide a few more details on what you maybe have or don't have in place, and then workshop the results to get the right people in a room to talk about those issues and really understand them. And then that leads us into identifying impacts, risks, and opportunities. So 7 key steps here. So 1, getting leadership buy-in, so secure that support from senior management to ensure time and budget is allocated into the right areas. Map out your stakeholders, so list the key people or groups affected by or who are influencing your business, from employees, customers, suppliers, investors, local communities. And then identify those potential topics, so create that initial list of environmental, social and governance issues relevant to your operations and your value chain. And then gather input if you have time as well. So run quick surveys, maybe short interviews, focus groups with stakeholders to understand which topics matter most to them and to your business. And then you're looking into screening for those 2 perspectives. So consider both angles, the impact side and the financial side. And then from here, start to prioritize. So plot those key topics on a simple matrix from high versus low significance to highlight those priorities and have those conversations. And then from there, you can plan next steps. So decide which topics need immediate action and which require monitoring and can be reviewed further down the line, and set that timetable for a more detailed assessment later. But the good news here is, I would say steps 2 to 7 can all be done in one workshop. It's just about getting the right people in that room to talk about these issues, map out those stakeholders, gather those inputs, and then prioritize from there. And then top tip for SMEs is really just to start small. So use what data you already have. So the first DMA, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's basically just a baseline that you can refine over time. And this leads us into reporting. So once you've completed that DMA, you can then move into more of the reporting side. And reporting tends to fall into one of two categories. So you've got mandatory and voluntary. Mandatory reporting captures organisations which meet certain thresholds, so usually larger companies first and then trickles down to the SMEs. Whereas SMEs are more likely to go down the voluntary route, so reporting to CDP, the VSME standards and GRI. And what's important to take from this slide is all of the standards or frameworks that you can see here require double materiality in some format. So whether it's the TCFD or CDP, which require you to disclose financial risk and opportunities, take those out of that DMA assessment, or the GRI, which it requires reporting of impacts. Again, you've got that impact side, so you can directly just lift that out to report to GRI, or the CSRD, which requires both sides, the double materiality side. So the point I'm really trying to make is completing this assessment just sets you up for any of those reporting routes in the future. And more importantly as well, and this is not just from a disclosure perspective, but also other requests coming in outside of reporting and disclosure. So for example, supply chain requests. You might be a smaller business that doesn't fall into scope for some of the mandated regulations. But if you're supplying a corporate that is mandated, they're going to need to start reporting on their own supply chain, which might include you. And those corporates will have to start reporting on impacts, risks, and opportunities of their suppliers, which means they're going to start coming to you and expecting to see the outcomes of a double materiality assessment, because all of that data is being reported upwards. And that's what we're seeing as a consultancy at the moment, is companies coming in and giving us Excels and saying, oh, our customers asked us to fill this in, and it's all CSRD language, and it's because they need to start reporting on those impacts. Plus, there is an increasing expectation on ESG in the bid process as well. So being able to demonstrate ESG maturity via double materiality, which is one of the first things you can do, shows a really carefully considered approach to sustainability issues outside of reporting, and can give you that edge over competitors who are also bidding. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers here, because I'm back in a few weeks to talk about this specifically with Stephen, our founder, on ESG in the tender process. So yeah, stay tuned for that one. Great, and a few key takeaways before we jump into the Q&A. So really remember to think about double materiality as it's not just for compliance. It's a very incredibly invaluable business tool. For any SMEs on the call and who are thinking about taking on this assessment, really lean into that top-down approach. It's much easier, much more streamlined, and is a great opportunity, again, just to workshop some of those responses and issues. Remember that double materiality opens up all reporting options as well. So you'll be able to report to those frameworks and standards that require financial materiality or impacts, or both. And just keep in mind as well that it can be used for tender bids as well, and those customer data requests, as more data is required to be reported upwards. And I just want to leave this here as a real key takeaway for today. So whether you're being requested data from your customers or you're just starting out in your ESG journey, keep in mind that double materiality is the future of ESG. It's important for you to complete from a business growth perspective, but also to meet those evolving demands from your customers and regulators. So if you want to chat further about double materiality, then let me just click through, scan this QR code, and this books a meeting directly in with me. I love it. I love double materiality. I could talk about it all day. So please use this link here, and we can have a bit of a discussion around who you are, what your needs are, who you're supplying, and what approach we could take in terms of double materiality that makes sense for your business. Absolutely no obligation call as well. I'm just always happy to have a chat about it where I can. Awesome. Q&A. Let's see if anything came through here. Got quite a few questions. What I'll do is I'll answer any that are relevant to all businesses on the call. If there's anything that's coming through that's quite specific, I'll reach out with you one-to-one. So don't worry, you'll get your question answered. But just in the interest of time, it might be useful just to answer anything that's applicable to everyone. Nice, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, it's good, always good to brush up on B Corp standards. They'll look for more on the impact side. Eleanor, just wanting to ask if it's a legal requirement for SMEs. Not right now. It is just a best practice approach, but the thresholds for CSRD are currently being debated, and this is likely to capture SMEs in a few years. But those thresholds for inclusion have not been formally signed off yet. So it's worth just keeping on your radar that it may be coming down the line, particularly if you've got activity in Europe. Also, there'll be UK adoption of the standards as well, which will start asking SMEs to start reporting this data. Eleanor, again, are any thresholds that trigger reporting obligations? The thresholds are different per regulation, so it's just worth checking online to see which ones you may be falling into scope for in now or in the future. Yep, David, that's correct. Nothing in the UK yet, but keep an eye on it as this may change in the future. If you have operations in Europe as well, that's very much likely to change. Also worth having a conversation around who your customers are and if they're falling into scope, because this is where these requests start to trickle down. So happy to chat to you after this call. When choosing a top-down approach, can you minimize the risk of excluding stakeholder voices? Would you advise? Yeah, if you have the time and the capability to run a mini survey, then absolutely do it. You could also get a representation of some of stakeholder groups as well, and maybe just interview somebody that's responsible for various stakeholders, if that's a quicker way of getting to the answers, or supplement with the bottom-up side as well. So have a top-down view, get the issues out there, and then do a bit of desk research to support that. Any last questions to come through? If not, I will do a quick shout out to our next series. So we're kind of going straight in just over a month's time, which is season 2. And this is focused on driving change across your value chain. So don't worry, we'll send you these slides so you can read more detail around each one. But we'll be covering topics on how ESG supports the tender process, breaking down EPDs, LCC and LCA, and what the sustainability reporting landscape might look like in 2026. That's everything from me. Thank you so much for your time today. And these slides will be distributed, so have a great rest of the day.